Welcome to the Knowledge Entrepreneurs Show, where we celebrate the innovators driving change in the education industry. At Edison OS, we've worked with over 500 knowledge entrepreneurs to turn their edtech ideas into profitable businesses. Hi, Brian. Welcome to the Knowledge Entrepreneur Show. Thanks so much for taking time out for this.
Thanks so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
It's my pleasure, Brian. Brian, my first question to you, how did you get into teaching or, the education thing? Is it something that you planned growing up? Is that what you wanted to do?
Okay, that's a good question. So let's see. No, I guess although I had a father who like always told me that teaching is a great profession. I mean, he was a doctor, but I think he always wanted to be a teacher. So I don't know. I guess maybe I had that subconsciously in my mind from an early age. And then no, I mean I worked in documentary film for a couple of years, and I thought I really loved film. I was a film studies major for a little while, so I did that, and then basically I had one job in documentary film where I was like a my title is fact verification researcher, and so basically I was working on a historical documentary about Napoleon, and my job was to make sure that everything in the film was accurate. And I really liked that more than I liked the filmmaking part of it, and so I was like, oh, I think I'd like to go back to school and get a PhD in history and become a history professor. And so that's basically what I did. After the documentary film stuff wrapped up, I went back to school, worked. I didn't finish the PhD, so I don't have a PhD, but I got to the dissertation phase basically. And really, the problem was that I was never really that interested in the research. I was more interested in the teaching part of it. So I kind of stalled out when it came time to write, like a 300-page dissertation. But yeah, so I got to do college teaching along the way, actually. And so that was how I really got started. And then in doing that, I was a PhD student living in New York City, and it's pretty hard to live in New York City on the, salary of a PhD student. So I was like, all right, well, what else can I do to supplement here? And I had taken the GRE to go to grad school, and I had, done very well in the GRE, and I'd always been very good at standardized tests. So I was like, you know what, I think I could probably teach or tutor GRE stuff on the side. And so the first thing I did was went and worked for Kaplan. And that was really how I got started really with GRE stuff. And then we can talk more about this if you want, but basically that led to, I love standardized tests. I kind of like teaching and tutoring the GRE and the GMAT more than I really like doing my PhD. And although like I really enjoy teaching, college level history, I really actually more enjoyed teaching the GMAT and the GRE than teaching that. And so then that basically led me to kind of give up my college professor kind of dreams and turn to like test prep.
Got it, Brian. Thank you for that walkthrough. Brian, I was just wondering, so to go to graduate school, everybody in the US has to take GRE, is it?
Most programs require the GRE.
Right.
Okay, so for PhD programs, most require the GRE, but not all. I think there are some that probably don't. But yeah, I think most require the GRE.
Okay. So what's the difference between doing what is the why do people write SAT and why do people write GRE?
Oh, well, so yeah, so I mean, so for undergraduate, for getting a bachelor's degree, right? Bachelor of Arts, Bachelor of Science, that's SAT or ACT. That's we're dealing
So
with.
completing bachelors, people who complete bachelors are not considered graduates?
They are not. No, that's an I mean, that's an undergraduate degree, and then like a graduate degree is when you. Yeah, I don't know. It's now that you're saying it, that's a good question. Why is it called undergraduate when you've graduated with a degree, a college degree? But yeah, technically that's like an undergraduate education, and then graduate school is beyond college, right? So like
Right.
yeah, so
Okay.
SAT and ACT are to get into college, university, right? And then once you finish that, then you could go on and try to do a master's or a PhD or some kind of like, you could be a doctor or a lawyer. There's other graduate degrees. And then there's, separate tests for those, right? So like law school has the LSAT, um,
Right.
medical school has the MCAT, and then basically, and business school has the GMAT, and then really everything else besides law school, medical school, and business school, it's the GRE, including actually veterinary school. Believe it or not, you would think veterinary school should be pretty similar to medical school, but actually the GRE is the test that you take to go to veterinary school. So yeah, like when you're, these are now you're talking about mid 20-year-olds applying to, go for further degrees.
Interesting. This is a new thing. Wow. Okay, I need to go do a little bit of reading about this because I was of the assumption that, because in India, you complete 12 years of education there, and then, there, what do you call? You call it junior year and senior year, I guess.
Yeah, yeah,
And that's 12 years of education, right?
yeah,
And
yep,
then there is the bachelor's, it's 4 years in the
yeah,
US.
yeah, yep.
Right. So in India, it could be 3 or 4 years,
Uh-huh.
and you're considered a graduate, and
Mm,
then you're considered a postgraduate if you do a master's,
mm.
or maybe I'm wrong. That's what I need to check.
Yeah, because
Thank you for
actually,
this.
I feel like I should probably know this. Maybe I'm saying it wrong, but I'm pretty sure that
No, maybe it's
like
different in the US, and I was probably of a certain assumption, but I'm going to get it clarified
yeah,
anyway.
yeah, because
This
I
is
think
this is a good thing.
postgraduate actually I think is like after you finish graduate school, you can do like a postgraduate like fellowship or something like that, where you already have a master's or PhD, and now you're doing even more than that, I think. But
Right.
yeah, that's beyond my pay grade. Yeah,
Got it.
yeah.
Got it, Brian. And Brian, you said, you sort of prefer teaching GRE and GMAT compared to, what you were teaching as a professor. You were teaching history, and history was not, it's not like you were forced into it. That was, again, your interest because of the documentary film. So what changed? And what about GRE and GMAT seemed, more interesting than history?
Yeah, great question. I feel like
Because I
this
love
all,
history myself. So I was like,
yeah,
oh, okay.
yeah. So it's funny because like all this on the one hand, like in thinking about this, like about talking about kind of the trajectory, I kind of thought of it as like, well, these are just like kind of random occurrences in my past, but like really, it obviously all like kind of funnels, it all channels forward in a certain direction for a reason, obviously. So yeah, and I think it actually even connects to like kind of how we at my company, like how we approach the tests themselves. So it all sort of wraps together. But basically, I think if I were teaching history at Harvard, or some top school, and having like small seminars with really motivated students, I probably would have felt differently about it. But I mean, I was not teaching at places
Right.
like that, right? I was teaching at the College of Staten Island. No offense to College of Staten Island, and I was also working at St. Francis College in Brooklyn. And like, I would have a class of 50 students, and there would be like two really motivated, really smart, kids in the class who really wanted to learn. And I wasn't even, the truth is, I was lucky. I wasn't even doing like intro like classes. I even had like a mid-level like European 20th century European history class. So like, in theory, you'd have people there who want to be there. And, really most of them didn't seem to want to be there. And so it just like wasn't that rewarding. It was like the two kids in the class who really wanted to learn. That it's sort of like those are the people who I was really, excited to be teaching, and everyone else, it just felt like I was a little bit babysitting them. Um, and when it comes to the GMAT and the GRE, there's a second part to this. But anyway, when it comes to the GMAT and the GRE, especially at like a tutoring level, you're dealing with like very motivated learners, right? Like these people want to
Right.
get good score, and they're not 16-year-olds, they're 25-year-olds, and they want to go to business school, they want to get a PhD or whatever, or veterinary school, whatever it might be. And so they're super motivated. So it's like they really want to learn. They're really interested in what you're saying as a teacher. And, that's just
Right.
much, much more rewarding. And then I think the other thing is I do love history, and I really enjoyed, I did enjoy, and I think I still would enjoy teaching history. But what I really enjoyed is teaching people how to think critically. So like I'm not up there just explaining what happened in 20th century Europe. It's really trying to get debate going. And, these historians, view the origins of World War I in this way, and these historians view it in a different way. And like, what do you guys think? And let's talk about it. And, so really getting people to think critically and not just passively like absorb information, right? Like that's what I like to, that's what interests me. I think that's what's important in the real world. And so that's what I was trying to emphasize in these classes, but like I could only get like three people to talk, you know what I mean? No one else was paying attention or
Yeah.
cared enough or had the confidence enough or whatever. And so that maybe leads into kind of how we do things at Reason Test Prep, in terms of like approaching the test, is that, the name of the company is Reason Test Prep. It's a little bit of a pun, but it's because reasoning is the main focus of what we teach. And so I found that in dealing with the GMAT and the GRE, more so than the SAT and the ACT, like they are reasoning tests. And that's really what the tests tend to reward. And so you're really teaching people, you're not just teaching them algebra and geometry and stuff like that. I mean, that's a little bit of it, but like really, if you want to get a high score, it's about being a good problem solver and applying good critical thinking and sort of high order thinking skills. And so, yeah, I mean, I like immediately I was like, yeah, I like this a lot. I'm really teaching people how to be scrappy and how to think. And it felt more important even than like what, that seems crazy to say that, but it felt more important even than like what I was teaching in 20th century, European history.
Got it. Got it, Brian. And you said while you were a professor, you kind of did this to supplement your income, right?
Yeah.
The GRE, GMAT. And then, so what was the transition to making it full time like? What was the difference like? I mean, probably you may not have put that much importance into finding students when you were doing it as a supplemental thing. But how easy or difficult was it to make a decision? Okay, you know what? I'm just going to leave the professorship thing and I'm going to jump into, tutoring for GRE or GMAT full time.
How much context do you want for my answer here?
Go for it.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. I'll try to keep this brief, even with giving you like a fuller picture. So yeah, I mean, it's a little complicated. I think I knew that I was like souring of the idea of writing the PhD. I couldn't find a topic, or writing the dissertation. I couldn't find a topic that I was really interested in. And I don't know, I think I also just started to realize that maybe like being a history professor it's difficult to find a job. There are a lot of people who go into PhD programs and there are not that many jobs available, right? So like, I was like, am I really going to even find a job? If so, do I really want to live in like Nebraska, even if I could find a job? Again, no offense to Nebraskans out there, but like I'm a New Yorker. I just wasn't sure, I was already married at that point. And if it made sense, I was going to, practically speaking, move to Nebraska. So I think I was already kind of souring on that idea that it was really going to work out. And then there were some other things happening. I'll try to leave some of that out. But basically, I realized I needed to like just make a kind of a full pivot. And so, yeah, I mean, then I was like, all right, what can I do? Again, leaving out some of the other things. I had a couple of other options of what I could do. Again, I could tell you more about that if you want to know. But basically, I was like, why don't I just make this my full-time thing of just doing tutoring and just, SAT, ACT, GMAT, and GRE. And yeah, so I had worked for Kaplan for a couple of years, then was doing it on my own, kind of on the side, basically. I was in Thailand for part of that. That's another whole thing we could talk about if you want. But I was working for Kaplan even in Thailand for a little bit.
Okay.
That was a really interesting experience. And then when we came back from Thailand, my wife and I had already been doing kind of on my own, but I was supplementing just kind of on the side. And then I was like, all right, let me make this my full-time thing. And actually I had like a little interlude there where I worked for Veritas, which was a only GMAT prep company. So for them, I was doing GMAT, and then I was doing separately kind of GRE, SAT, and ACT. So I was kind of bootstrapping it a little bit. And then eventually I was like, okay, like I have enough of my own here. I don't need to be, I think I only worked for Veritas for like a year, but at that point I was like, look, I don't need to be working for Veritas anymore. I have enough with my own GRE, SAT, and ACT stuff. And then eventually, because I had like a non-compete, so like I wasn't doing any GMAT stuff actually. on the side
Right.
while I was doing that. And then eventually once that expired, then I, kind of jumped back into doing, GMAT stuff too. So I feel like I'm dancing around here a little bit, but I guess basically it did take a little while to, it would have been hard for me to just have no income whatsoever and then just be like, I want to be a tutor and just kind of start. And honestly, even in those like early years, there was definitely like a lot of hard work that went into getting clients. I mean, we can talk a lot about that if you want, but there was a lot of
Yeah,
things I
sure.
tried, and yeah, I mean, it definitely was a long, arduous journey.
After Veritas is when you kind of, went full time with yourself. And how long did it take for you to get to a point where you felt, okay, all your time is getting utilized and you're working at your full capacity?
Yeah. Um, Yeah, I mean, again, it's a little complicated because I did have a kind of in between Kaplan and Veritas where I was already kind of doing stuff, to on the side. I was doing SAT and ACT stuff and GMAT and GRE, and then so I was already kind of doing it. But I guess like once I was like, all right, this is just my full-time thing, let me create a website because I didn't have a website at first. There's a whole backstory on that too, but for a long time I didn't even have a website. I'm kind of a private person, and I thought like I don't really want people knowing that much about what I do, which is really silly when you're starting a business. But I don't know. But anyway, I also just didn't think it would help that much. Believe it or not, that was idiotic, really, to think that having a website wouldn't help. But anyway, again, this gets more into kind of how I was generating business, and I just didn't think I really needed it. But so yeah, I mean, I guess once I like really committed to it, it probably took me you know I guess not that long, maybe, you know, maybe like a year or two to like really have a lot of referrals. And then, it took longer than that to feel like I have so many referrals and so much like, business that like I really don't need to worry that much. I mean, that took longer.
God, it's interesting, you directly said it took so much time to get referrals because that also says that, most of your business comes through reference. But, it's interesting that you said, you were a person, but the whole tutoring thing is about putting yourself out there to get more students, right?
Yeah.
So, did you get to that point of where, you broke away from your idea of being private? And then, did you eventually put yourself out there, being active on social media to get students and stuff, or did it, somehow work out for you through reference itself?
It's still almost entirely from referrals, really. Like even now, I mean, I have a much more dynamic website, and we have a newsletter that goes out, and we have
Yeah,
articles on the website, and stuff like that. So there's a lot that we're kind of doing, and still like it's almost like the website is more of a business card, you know what I mean, and
right.
like source of information rather than
Information.
right, rather than like a lead generator, I would say at this point. I mean, maybe that'll change, but um, so um, sorry, I think I forgot what I was going to say relative to your question, but um,
That's okay. Uh,
oh, I know what I was
no,
going to say.
I think we were talking about, you were saying it was still coming 100% from referrals alone. And I was trying to ask if you really got out of your
Yeah.
way of being private and put yourself out there to get more students. Yeah, that's what we were talking about.
Yeah, yeah, and I just thought too of what I was going to say. So I actually had what happened was, so yeah, I mean, like obviously I did eventually overcome that. Um, I think a lot of the beginning, like if I think back, a lot of this was just like me, um, just trying to figure things out, right? Like I didn't, now I view myself a little bit more as like a business person.
Right.
At the time I definitely didn't view myself that way, and I had no business experience really. So I was just kind of figuring things out, and I am definitely like a creative thinker, like I was saying, like a critical thinker and a problem solver. That's been the nature of these tests, and that's what I'm teaching people. So I am pretty good at that. So it was like kind of just like figuring out how do I do this, and I would try things that I probably could have just been like talking to people and being like, copying what everyone else did. But I was like, why don't I try this? Why don't I try that? And the truth is that like, again, we can get more into the details of that, but probably 80% of that led nowhere, right? But, or
Right.
maybe 90% led nowhere, but like 10% did lead somewhere, and it probably led somewhere that isn't what other people were doing. You know what I mean? So it was a lot of like misses, but then a few home runs. You know what I mean? Um, but so what happened was, so yeah, I mean, I was trying all these different things. I was like putting, my business card at like local, local businesses, and like that led nowhere. That was a lot of time that like really led absolutely nowhere. And I mean, in the very beginning, I was like posting on, like physically posting on, we were talking about, 15 years ago or something like that, 20, maybe more than that, posting things where you rip off the little bottom with like my phone number on it, like stuff like at Starbucks, you know what I mean? Like I was doing all things like that. Really, none of that. I mean, that led almost nowhere. Those kinds of things. And then I tutored someone whose mom was like a web designer. And she was like, I became friendly with her. And she was like, why don't you have a website? And I was like, well, like, I don't think parents, I was just convinced that it was going to all, especially for SAT and ACT, I was convinced that was all going to be referral. And it wasn't going to come from people like, like, I was like, what parents are like searching for an SAT tutor? Like, that's all referral. And she was like, what are you talking about? Basically, like, what are you talking about? That's not, that makes no sense. And so I was like, so she convinced me. I mean, it literally took her convincing me that I should actually create a website, and me getting over the fact that I guess for whatever reason I just didn't want. I don't know why I felt that way, but yeah, I was, like I said, I'm kind of a private person. I just didn't really want to have myself out there like that on the internet. And so, yeah, I finally put up a website. That wasn't until like, I don't know, 2012, 2013, 2014. And I'd already been doing
That's not bad.
it on and off though for like 10 years at that point, basically. So,
Got it, Brian.
yeah. Um,
And it says you do SAT, ACT, GMAT, GRE, probably not in that order. So what is, because in the pre-podcast call you said, you focus more on the GRE, GMAT and not a lot on SAT, ACT. What's the split like and why is it so?
I mean, that has changed over the years. There were times where it was probably as much as 50-50, maybe even sometimes where it was a little more SAT and ACT than GMAT and GRE. But that's definitely not been like overall. It's been, for my whole history of this, I started with GRE. I've really done much more GMAT and GRE stuff. And even now, like the current split is probably, I don't know, maybe call it 15%, 20% SAT and ACT. And yeah, like 80% ish, 85% GMAT and GRE. So overwhelmingly, like what we do is GMAT and GRE. There are 5 of us now, so I have 4 other tutors. And yeah, I mean, bulk of what we're doing is GMAT GRE, and yeah, I can tell you more about that and why that is the case. And
Is that a conscious thing or it's just how the business unfolded?
I think both, really. I think that, so as I was saying, the GRE is the test you would take for all graduate school except for law school and medical school and then business school. But actually, for business school and law school, those schools now take the GRE also. So it's really like you can use the GRE. Not every law school takes it, but every business school, every major business school takes a GRE. So really, like
Right.
the GRE is good for everything except for medical school, essentially. And so, we do a lot. We could talk more about this of percentage of GRE versus GMAT and why it's shifted more towards GRE lately. But basically, almost everyone we work with is looking to go to business school. So they're using either doing the GMAT, which is the business school test, or they're using the GRE to apply to business school. And we don't have that many people who are using the GRE for a master or like a PhD program or stuff like that. So we almost all of our referrals and clients is almost all aspiring graduate business school applicants, and so this is all getting to the point that part of it is that it's it's a very like high demand and like profitable thing, frankly, because people are business school. If you're going to do a master's in sociology, or in like social work, right? And you're going to become a social worker. You're not going to make that much money as a social worker, right? But if
Right.
you are trying to get to Harvard Business School or Wharton or Stanford Business School, right? Like you are very likely to come out of there and make a lot of money, or you'll probably make a lot of money as soon as you come out, and you'll make a lot of money like 5 or 10 years down the line. So it's of all the like test prep stuff out there, it's the one that's like the most direct, the most obvious investment that you're making that you're going to get back. I mean, even parents who are paying a lot of money for SAT and ACT prep, like so yeah, okay, my daughter got into Dartmouth, but if she becomes like an art history major and like becomes a curator of like a museum, on a monetary level, like you're not getting much back from that investment. You know what I mean?
Right.
To say nothing of how expensive Dartmouth is. But even if you spent $50,000 in test prep, right? Like that you're probably not getting much back financially. Whereas yeah, with like the types of people that we deal with, they want to go to top business schools, and so it's an investment, and they know they're going to get that investment back. So that's part of it, is that it's a pretty like people are willing to pay a lot of money for really great help, if it can help them get to a great score on the GMAT or the GRE. So that's part of it. And I can tell you more just about like the other differences between SAT and ACT versus GMAT and GRE, and kind of why there's some other reasons too why we do more of that.
Got it, Brian. We'll get to that. And I think you also spoke about how it's easier to deal with adults, who
Yeah.
are, already motivated, and you don't have to do the motivation part.
Yeah.
So I would assume that you rather stick to teaching and not worry much about motivating students or, helping them with other things, right?
100%. It's just, I mean, I hate to say it because there are other things that are rewarding about dealing with a 16-year-old, because I think you can have
Right.
more of an impact on them, that maybe take carries
Yeah.
of their life. They're more impressionable at that point. But yeah, like you're dealing with motivated students, in terms of GMAT GRE students. They're very motivated, and it's just yeah, it's more enjoyable if you really like teaching and you really like helping people. It's also, for me personally, those tests are harder, and like I mean, we deal with, this is going to sound like I'm, being immodest or whatever, but like we get a lot of like Ivy League graduates, graduates of undergrad, Ivy League colleges. It doesn't matter that they're Ivy League. Let's just say they're very smart. They're people who did really, really well on the SAT or the ACT. Like, we get people who scored perfect or near perfect on the SAT or ACT. And even those people need a lot of help for the GMAT and the GRE, because those tests are hard, and they've been out of school for a while. Usually that's part of it too, but like they're difficult tests. Like even if you're a really good test taker, it's still hard to really crush the GMAT or the GRE. So, I mean, just personally, I like that better because I'm dealing with really dynamo students, and even they like are struggling, and so it's just more of a challenge and more fun to deal with like the hardest questions that we can deal with.
Got it, Brian. I've spoken to a lot of people from the SAT, ACT industry, but not off late. Haven't spoken to a lot of people, who are teaching GRE, GMAT. So what's happening generally in the world of GRE, GMAT? Like, in the world of SAT and ACT, SAT just turned digital. ACT, it's going to get digital. Probably it's going to take some time.
Mhm.
Uh, is the GMAT, GRE also, does it undergo a lot of changes and updates and upgrades? Or
There's
how's
so
it?
much there's so much I could say here, so let me try to sketch it out, and then you could tell me where you want to poke and like deeper. um
Sure.
Geez, where do I start? So first of all, yeah, there's been a lot of changes. It's very
Oh,
similar
yeah.
to
Okay.
SAT and ACT, actually, very, very similar. So I wonder if it's just like an industry-wide like contagion, like contagion within the industry. um but So one thing is, like the SAT and the ACT, the GRE and the GMAT have both gotten shorter, and it's kind of funny, but like I think the GMAT announced first. I'm pretty sure the GMAT announced first they were shortening the GMAT, right? And then within like a month, ETS was like, we're shortening the GRE, because they compete with each other. I mean,
Right.
for the business school and law school applicants, and that's a big part of the customer base who are taking the GRE basically. So so they've both gotten shorter. The GRE just shortened itself without really changing itself at all, whereas the GMAT got shorter and had like a full overhaul, like a pretty significant overhaul to what's actually even on the test. We can talk more about that, but that has really shaken things up a bit in terms of how we advise people whether they should do GRE or GMAT, because the tests are very different. I mean, they're very similar, but they're different from how they used to be. And so that's changed. Like that's part of why we're doing, I think, more GRE work really than we used to, and a little bit less GMAT work. And then another thing is just like, this is getting maybe in the weeds, but like, ETS, I think, is in a little bit of trouble. The company that makes the GRE, they've done a voluntary layoff for like their entire like North American staff, basically, where essentially like anyone who wants to like take like a 1 year, walk away, we'll just give you like a 1 year severance package or something like that. We'd love for you to walk away before we have to start firing people.
Oh wow, okay.
And that's actually partly related to the SAT, because I think ETS used to have the contract to administer the SAT, and now I think College Board does that directly. And I think that was like 30% of their revenue was from administering the SAT, and they're no longer doing that. So that was huge. And then since COVID, there's just been a decline in number of test takers for GRE and GMAT. And so that's really pressed both of GMAC, company that makes the GMAT, and ETS. And so, yeah, like there's things going on with the test even where I worry about the GRE. Like they no longer have an experimental section, which means in theory, unless they're embedding experimental questions into the other sections, which I don't think they are, that they're not even experimenting with new questions and creating new questions. So that worries me a little bit, because what's going to happen when they run out of questions? You know what I mean? So like, I actually don't know what's going to happen, but yeah, I mean, I know a lot of people kind of out there in this business, in this industry, and I don't know, there's like whispers that, ETS could be in some trouble. So I guess we'll see.
Wow. Is there an alternate to the GRE apart from GMAT in case anything happens?
Yeah, no, there isn't. I mean, and so I don't know like what would I mean, this is all just obviously speculation at this point, but would someone just come in and like buy, the GRE essentially and administer it, or could the GMAT just take its place, or would some new test get created or what? But I'm sure, yeah, like there's a need for it, so I can't imagine it's just gonna go away and nothing's gonna take its place. And maybe it'll be fine. But anyway, yeah, there's like some reason for concern.
Got it, Brian.
Yeah.
And when you first talk to students, you said mostly it's reference. So every conversation that you have with someone who's been referred, do they convert into becoming a student, or what's the percentage?
That's a good question. Yeah, no, not everyone.
Wow. Okay. Despite being referred, not everyone.
We're expensive, so that's the issue. Is that I think
how expensive?
Well, for GMAT and GRE, I mean, it ranges from $280 to $425 an hour. So
wow. Okay.
Yeah, we're like at the upper, I would say we're like the upper echelon of the like GMAT and GRE space, and that's why it's referral. That's again, I don't know like what first year, the chicken or the egg, but like part of the reason that I'm not so where I've a little bit let go of the idea of lead generation through the website is that the lead generation we get through the website, the conversion is pretty low, because unless people are just going to balk at a lot of people will balk at that rate unless they understand that they're getting a level of expertise that they're not going to get in other places, and that's what we get with the referrals. So it's a totally different, our conversion rate. I'm just making this up. I have no idea, but I probably should have an idea. To my point about not being a great business person, I probably should have this number. But I'd say for like the cold leads, our conversion rate's low. I don't know, maybe 10%, something like that, right? Whereas the referrals is probably I don't know. I mean, even with that high rate, it's probably 50% or something like that. I mean, a lot, but not 100, because I mean, some people, maybe they're, maybe they don't, it could be
No,
a
yeah,
variety of
it makes
reasons.
sense.
Obviously, it might not just be
Money
the
is
money.
money is definitely one of the important things.
Yeah.
And what's the typical duration someone takes? Or okay, before I go to this question, so do you diagnose a student when they come and sign up with you to assess where they are, and you kind of give an estimate as to how long is it going to take for them to be able to take the test?
Totally. Yeah. Yeah. Again, this is going to sound like me being immodest, but just frankly, I've been doing GMAT and GRE stuff for more than 20 years now. And like, I've personally tutored like 1,000 students, and every admission cycle, I've gone through it. So I've seen the whole thing. The timeline is just a merry-go-round every year. It's kind of a similar thing. So like, I can make very good predictions about what it's going to take, how long it's going to take, how likely you are to get to the score that you're saying you want to get to. No, we need to talk you down from that. You're not likely to get to that score. You know what I mean?
Right.
The probability they're going to get to that actual score. So yeah, like that's usually what happens in like the initial call with people. And yeah, I mean, the truth is, again, just imagine imagine someone who literally like went to Harvard undergrad, had a near perfect score on the SAT, and even that person, to get to like a really, really high score on the GMAT, the type of score that they want, to get to Harvard Business School or Wharton or something like that, that person probably still needs, at least 3 months, but probably 3 to 6 months of prep. So
Wow. And how many sessions with you in those 3 to 6 months?
usually, remember, these are people that normally have a full-time job. So it's
Right.
usually, one session a week. We do 2-hour sessions for GMAT and GRE with some exceptions, but typically 2-hour sessions. And yeah, I mean, we're probably assigning, 6 to 10 hours of homework per week if they can do more. I mean, some people need to be doing more than that, but like not less than 5 or 6 hours, and probably 10 is like kind of the sweet spot. But again, they're juggling a lot of these people because they're trying to go to business school. They're working in banking, they're working in private equity, they're working in like very demanding consulting, they're working in super demanding jobs to begin with. So it's a lot. It's a lot to juggle. So that's part of why, if you gave me someone who had no job and had nothing to do, that whole time
Right.
frame could get condensed into a much shorter thing. But like basically you need to do, let's say at least 10 to 20 tutoring sessions, and like 10 hours of work in between each of those sessions. So you could scrunch that down or you can kind of extend that out, but it usually ends up being, 3 to 6 months and a lot of work.
10 hours in between two consecutive sessions
Yes.
of yours. That's
Yeah.
what you're saying. So if they do 10 sessions with you, then they have to sit down with themselves for 100 hours.
Yeah.
Is
And
that
like,
right?
yeah. And like 100 hours for the GMAT of the GRE is honestly like not enough, really. I mean, that's really not
Wow. Okay.
enough for most people. Yeah. I mean, keep in mind, right? Like, again, we're not talking about someone who's applying for a master's in anthropology or art history or something like that. These are people applying to, so like for some of those people, they could maybe study for 2 weeks, take the test, get like an okay score, and they're going to get into that master's in art history because that's what people who are applying for master's in art history are doing on the GRE. They're preparing for a couple of weeks and taking it, right? But
Right.
because business school is so competitive, because there's a financial reward at the end of the rainbow, right? Like people are willing to do a lot. And if everyone else is doing a lot, it means that you need to do a lot. You know what I mean? So like it just ups
Right.
the ante for everyone else. So that's just,
Right.
I think that explains, because people, again, like we do get a lot of really heavy hitter, highly qualified people who are very, very smart, who've done very well on standardized tests. And they're like, I don't get it. Like, how is it possible that I need to do this amount of work? And I'm like, well, because that's what everyone else is doing. So like if you're not doing it too, then you're just at a disadvantage.
Are there instances you turn away students? Do you think, you know what, you're wasting your money here?
That's a great question. Not exactly in that context. There are cases where like we'll be working with someone, I'll be working with someone, I mean, just personally over all the years I've been doing this, I've had cases where like I feel like the student needs a different look. and maybe I haven't been able to get them to the right score, or maybe personality wise it's not the right fit, and I feel like they're honestly just like not listening to the advice I'm giving them, and maybe they don't want to hear what I have to say. And so like I just feel like it's not it would be best for them to, move to someone else. So that definitely has happened. But I mean, for me, it's just about giving, I guess, I think people turn themselves away when I give them the right expectations. Do you know what I mean? So if someone comes to me and is like, look, I'm at so the GRE goes from 130 to 170. Let's say they're at a 140, 140 on quant and 140 on verbal. And they're like, I need to get 160 plus, which is 160 plus is where you'd want to be for the top business schools. I would say, look, it's not impossible. I've seen it happen, but there's a very good chance you're not going to get to that. So I'm not going to say no, because people will say, is that possible? And I'm always like, well, that's not the right question to ask, right?
Yes. Yeah, it's not the right question to ask. Yes. Yeah.
The better question is, what's the probability that I'm going to get to that?
What are the odds that? Yeah. Right. Yeah.
I'll be like, they're low, right? Like if you force me to give you a percent chance, like right now, I'd say 10% chance, or something like that. And then I'd say something like, and this is what it's going to take. It's going to take a lot of work, and it's going to take a lot of help. You're probably going to need a lot of tutoring. Honestly, you're not going to be able to just do it all on your own. You're going to need a lot of help. So this is what I think it's going to look like. And then, we can try, as long as you understand that I think of like a bell curve, you're down here in the second standard deviation, to get to a 160 on both sections, right? I think the center of the curve is probably a 155 on each section. You know what I mean?
Right.
And, but there's also a tail end of that, the other tail of the curve, where it's like a low 150s. So kind of that's how I would describe it. I'm happy to help you, but I think, that's just what I see as the likely outcome and what it's going to take. And then, people sometimes, are like, okay, I really appreciate your honesty. And then, I never hear from them again.
Got it, Brian. And you spoke about personality, maybe it wasn't a personality fit. So you said you've got about 4 to 5 people on your team. Are you all different from a personality point of view, so that, you could probably match students? Is that a thing even?
That's a great question. Like yes and no. I mean, I think I hire people who have a similar personality, right? Like, I mean, that's not
I was
true.
expecting, okay, I'm hiring people who are different.
No, I mean, that's a terrible way to say it. I think if you met the 5 of us in a bar, right, you'd be like, okay, these are very, very different people. So like, I think we probably have actually very different personalities, but like maybe similar.
Probably you're talking from an IQ point of view. It's similar.
IQ, and maybe like as a teacher, perhaps. Like I think like similar like level of patience and like understanding and like empathy and like things like that. Like, you know what I mean? Like I might be more of like a firecracker and like type A. Again, I'm just thinking of like meet us all in a bar. Maybe, we'd be slightly different personalities in that setting. But I think as teachers, we're like, I'm looking for people, because I mean, truthfully, if you want to get into like hiring and training and stuff like that, like I think that I can take someone who has the right personality as a teacher, has the right teaching instinct, right? And who's really smart and who's naturally good at standardized tests, and help them become a great GMAT or great GRE tutor. Whereas if you give me someone who's amazing at the GMAT and the GRE, but like I just don't like them, and I don't think anyone else is going to like them, or they're not patient, or they're not empathetic and can't understand that students can't think the way that they're thinking, like you could give me my whole life to try to turn that person into someone I want on my team, and I'm never going to be able to do it. Right. So I guess I haven't fully answered your question. So I guess so I think temperament-wise, teaching style-wise, and approach-wise, we're all very, very similar. But I definitely I think I'm frankly more try to match people a little bit kind of on like ability and like what they really need. You know what I mean? So like, because we're at different price points too. So like someone who's at a 140 on the GRE, like I can help that person, but maybe one of the other tutors who's at a lower price point can help them equally well, because they're at such a low level that like it's going to be, they don't need the most amazing insight into the test. You know what I mean? You need someone who's a good teacher and who's patient and all the
Right.
other things, but like they don't need to be, they don't need to have 20 years of GRE experience to help that person initially. So I think that often drives the pairing a little bit more, but then definitely like there are some cases where it's like, okay, this person is totally gonna love like this tutor, like on more on a personality level, and then I might make the match on like because of that.
Got it, Brian. Just another follow-up question on the personality thing. Whenever you probably thought, oh, probably, this isn't a great personality fit, what would you point that to? Is it got to do? I don't know. I'm coming from completely empty space, so I'm trying to understand if it's at a rapport building level, or is it about, not having the same type of humor, or, are you, uh, is the student, not much of a talker? I don't know. Have you ever been able to figure some aspects of that? Okay, what could be not fitting from a personality point of view?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, I'm saying this like half jokingly, but half, I'll throw
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
levity into this. Like I've learned a lot in hiring. Like I've hired people and then trained them and spent money and a lot of time and we pour a lot into training because again, I believe that we're at this kind of elite level and we want to provide elite level tutoring. So I want everyone on the team to be amazing, basically, right? So, it's hard. It can be hard to judge like how good someone's going to be, even if you vet them as well as you can and you do a bunch of interviews and have them do auditions and have them tutor someone and do all this other stuff. So I guess I would just say I've learned a lot and I've made mistakes and like I've hired people, trained them, and then at the end of the training, after a lot of time and a lot of money, been like, you know what, like I think you're not the right fit. And like I've paid them for their time or whatever, but like I've lost a lot of money and a lot of time because I didn't see in advance that they weren't the right person, basically. So I guess that's the first thing is like,
This
I'm
is
not great at.
despite them meeting your score criteria and all of those things, when
Yes.
they choose to work with you. I
Yeah,
saw that, you asked them the scores with the proof and all of those things.
totally.
So after all of these things, then there's a level of filtering that happens. Okay, got
Yeah,
it.
because again, like the score is not that, I mean, it's not that hard to find someone who's gotten a near perfect, I mean, it's not that easy, but like, there are enough people out there who've gotten a near perfect score on the GRE or GMAT, right? Like, but most of those people would not be good tutors. You know what I mean? So like,
Right, right,
I
right.
mean, there was a guy I had who, yeah, again, like I think he had a perfect score on the GRE, which is that's really, that's pretty unique. That's an amazing, achievement. And I don't know, like I even had him working tentative, like kind of training with a student where it was like free tutoring for that student. And like, yeah, I mean, both on a personality level and just like ability to tutor. I think I hired him too hastily. I think I hadn't vetted him enough, really. I think I was
Right, right.
also hoping things, again, this is all learning experience where like now I understand what can be coached and what can't be. You know what I mean? Or I have a better understanding of that than I used to. So yeah, like after all that, I was like, look, man, like I don't want to go further. And there were other personality things that were happening along there where he just like wasn't doing things that I was asking him to do. And, and so, I was like, I'm sorry. Like, here's like, here's the money that like, you've gotten for the last like couple weeks of work and I've paid you for all the other weeks of training that you've done and everything like that. But I think this is the best bet for both of us. But like on the personality thing, um, I mean, I think again, I don't think I'm like a amazing judge, I guess, of personality and character, but I think when you're on the front lines tutoring as much as I have and getting emails from people all the time looking for help, you can just start to like read between the lines, right? Like I can tell even just from a student, right? A student emails me, they're so considerate in their email, they're very like even deferential, like I love, I respect, maybe not saying I respect your time, but like they clearly do. And
Right.
that student's likely to be a joy to work with, right? And there's some people who like, I email them back and they give me like a one-word reply, like that
Right.
person's less likely to be like a good student, you know what I mean? And so it's the same thing with hiring. Like I can tell from the way they've answered the initial questions that we put out there in the job app, ad, that already filters some people out. And then, in a conversation with them, like, are they a likable person? Are they a normal person? Can they communicate? So I think, I don't know. I don't think I'm great at it, but I think it's not that hard to at least rule out most people. But then maybe between the final two or three, then it can be hard to judge. And that's, like I said, that's where it's been a learning experience for me.
Got it, Brian. And Brian, when it comes to teaching, I've come to learn that tutoring, anything, is not just the subject matter. Like you said, right? I mean, somebody's got a perfect score doesn't mean, they're going to be great at teaching. What I want to ask you is, what are the different, for example, in SAT and ACT, the different aspects that I've come to learn as a tutor that you got to be well versed with is the subject itself, and then, how you deal with probably some of the mental, psychological aspects of a student, and also to be able to help them retain what they learn from a memory point of view. So when it comes to GRE, and that's at that age level, right? 16, 17 years of age. Now, at the level that you're teaching, what are the things, apart from the subject matter, the technical stuff, that you have had to bring in, to kind of help your students?
Yeah, I mean, do you want me to answer that almost like more from like, what we as tutors are kind of like providing the students with and helping the students with, or more? Because at first when you were asking, I think that's what you're asking, but I could also kind of answer that in terms of like training and like sort of what I call pedagogy, and like what it means to be, a good tutor, and like how, from the tutor's perspective, what you're doing for the student in the meetings and stuff like that to like make them learn better and retain things and stuff like that.
Yeah.
I can answer both of those if you want.
Yeah, sure, go for it. Yeah.
So let me answer what I think you were really more getting at, which is just like what, like, we as tutors, what are we kind of doing for students? Yeah, so on the GMAT and GRE level, I think part of it is like this is something that like we really emphasize like on the website. This is one of the things that like if people go to the website and where we direct them there to like read it, because it's like you should understand this is part of what we do. It's like it's not just about like a student showing up and like we're helping them learn how to answer these certain questions better. It's really like guiding the entire process, right? So it's, like I said, they're going to see us for 2 hours and then be off on their own for 10 hours. Well, that 10 hours could either be as effective as possible or it could be not that effective, right? So like a lot of what we're doing is like is making sure that what students are doing outside of the tutoring is optimized, right? And so there's a lot to that. There's how are you actually doing practice questions, and are you doing 20 questions and then just seeing how many you got right or wrong, or are you reviewing after every single question, which is what you should do for reasons I can explain. But anyway, like that's just one example. So yeah, there's a lot of like coaching that we give them on what they should be doing, how they should be doing it outside of the meeting, so that they can make as much progress as they can. That's just one example. And then, if we getting like more specific, like timing and time management on the tests, like that's something that on the GMAT and the GRE, most people struggle with. So that's an example of something that's like not just like subject matter expertise, but just more like coaching people on almost like executive function. You know what I mean? And like, right? Like not just in terms of like how to study, that's also executive function, but like executive function when you're on the quant section of the GRE, you're making decisions about how to allocate time, and or why are you spending 5 minutes on that question? I mean, literally, I had a session right before this. So this is like literally just happened today, where the student he already took his GRE. He got a good score, but not a great score. Verbal was really high. Quant was lower than it should be. And we looked at like a couple of his practice tests, and like he left questions blank. He like skipped questions and like left them blank, right? And there's no penalty for, getting the question wrong. So, I mean, I was like, look, under no circumstances are you to leave a question blank.
Yeah.
Like, that's just like you're getting, I mean, he left like 6 questions blank. And some of those on the GRE, there are 4 answer choices instead of 5. So like even just a random guess, you have a 25% chance of getting it. Like that's just silly, right? So, and then the whole session was about really coaching him on the decisions he should be making about questions. And like, I would be like, hey man, like when you look at this question, tell me, how likely is it that you're going to get it right from your perspective? And how long do you think it's going to take? Right. And he'd be like, 75% chance I'm going to get it right. And I think it's going to take me 2 minutes. Right. I'm like, all right, let's see. And I know the question, so I know he's not that likely to get it right. So he went and did it. He didn't get it right. He spent like 3 minutes. And I'm like, that's a skill, is being able to identify in advance how likely you are to get the question right and how
Are you? Yeah, right.
Right.
So you can save your time if you're
Totally.
sure that you're not going to get, just move on. Give it a guess and then move on.
Yeah, I mean, spending 4 minutes on a question and getting it wrong is just about the worst thing you could do on the test, right? So
Right.
anyway, so that's very narrow, specific example of the kinds of things that we're doing for students that are not just like subject matter type things. And really, a lot of what we do is that. So,
Right. And what is the level of access students have, in between your meetings, right?
so I wish I could say it's unlimited and, up all in 3 a.m, let me answer emails and, phone calls and stuff like that. It's more limited than that. I mean, we have them doing things
Right.
like on a shared homework log and things like that, so that like we can check in and see what they're doing, and periodically we'll check in, and um, predictably, like if we're meeting someone on a Tuesday, nothing's done before Monday. Basically, if you check their homework log and you can see they haven't even done anything. So often that's the case, is people are waiting until right before to like do all the work or whatever. But there's a two-way. It goes both ways, where we're also kind of keeping tabs on what they're doing a little bit in between. You know, I would say, like, when students are really struggling with something, again, we try to give them as much resource help so that they can figure things out on their own in real time, which is the best way to do it. Occasionally, so I think we set expectations pretty early on, honestly, that like, look, like, if it's like you don't even know what you should be doing for homework, well then yeah, like 100%, like email me or call me or whatever. Like, let me just make sure you're spending your time efficiently. But when it comes to like, look, I'm really struggling with this one question, we'll ask students to wait until the meeting, because the truth is, like, even if I send an email back being like, here's how you do this question, like, it's not even as effective as like actually explaining it to them and showing them and drawing it on the screen and everything like that. So,
Right.
yeah.
Got it, Brian.
Yeah.
And logistics and operations, what are the tools, the tech that is involved for you to kind of make this seamless with your students?
Yeah, good question. Again, I've been doing online tutoring since like 2011.
Oh, wow. Okay. Much before the pandemic. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Skype. You started with Skype?
No, I actually started with WebEx. So I don't know if you
right. Yeah. Cisco WebEx. Yeah.
Cisco WebEx was actually the first. Maybe I did something like temporarily before that, but I think WebEx.
Zoom came in like 2014, I think. 2015, maybe.
Yeah, and we only switched. Now we're using Zoom, but we only switched, and I did it like really like begrudgingly, only because I just gave up on. I gave WebEx like 100 chances to like keep up, and like eventually I was like, forget it. I just like I was with you. I was your defender. I was your loyal defender from even in early COVID when everyone was on Zoom. I was like, nope, we need WebEx. We like WebEx better. And eventually I was like, I just can't defend WebEx any longer. Zoom is just better now for what we do. Right. So now we use Zoom. But like, yeah, again, like, we try to do things as well as they can be done. That's just part of like how we're doing things. So like, I spent a lot of time trying out a million different platforms before settling on WebEx. And I really thought like WebEx has everything, the best that we could find in 2011 or 2012, when it wasn't much. Right. There's like GoToMeeting and things like that, and
yeah, GoToMeetings was another thing.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, we use Zoom. Not all of the tutors, not all the team members here are using it exactly the same way. I personally like to use the Zoom whiteboard and load questions into the whiteboard, and then you can save that as a PDF, which is nice for the students. Some of our tutors would rather screen share and use like Notability or like some other thing where they're screen sharing the whole time. So different strokes for different folks. I used to, so I use a like a plug-in USB tablet to write. So, I have my screen, but then I have like flat on my desk. Like
Yeah.
where my right hand goes, like that's where I'm writing. That's really seamless. That works great. Occasionally, so I used to have students, that was almost like a mandatory thing. I'd be like, get one of these. They're not that expensive. Get one, and you can then write on the screen too. That's how I started when it was just me. Over the years, I just found that it wasn't necessary, and it was a little bit of a learning curve for students to get used to writing on the screen. So now we have some students who do it, but most don't. It's actually something I've been meaning to like, I've secretly been wanting to push back into that direction because I think there is a slight advantage to having students write directly on the screen. It's
Right.
not actually that big a deal, believe it or not, to have them not doing it. But anyway, that's another like logistics thing that we're not entirely doing, but I would kind of like to get back to that.
Got it, Brian.
Yeah.
And I mean, you said you probably teach 15, I mean, 15% of your business is SAT, ACT. And is that, I mean, do you have any part in that? Do you teach any other 15% or you just leave it to the other tutors? And
Yeah,
if you do, uh, how much of a context switch is it for you? Is it easy? Is it seamless? Or, is it a hassle? Oh, you know what? I should just leave SAT, ACT and just stick to GMAT, GRE. Like, what's your thought process like?
good question. So I do maintain a teeny bit of SAT and ACT stuff going at all
Just to
times,
stay in touch.
basically. I want to stay in touch. I want to have that be part of what I do. So yeah, I pretty much always have some SAT, ACT students, but majority of what I'm doing is GMAT and GRE personally. Like I said, I think there is something a little bit different about dealing with a very impressionable 16-year-old who you can really
Right.
maybe have a greater impact on the trajectory of their life. I mean, that sounds really grandiose. Probably most of the time I'm not having,
It's true, though.
but maybe more than the GMAT or GRE student, honestly. So I like it for that reason. I definitely prefer the GMAT and the GRE for the reasons I said before. It's harder tests. Students are more motivated. So yeah, but I don't think it's not for me. It's not hard really to switch back and forth. I mean, again, our philosophy is that these are reasoning tests. So yes,
Right.
you need to know your algebra, you need to know geometry, you need to know commas, like things like that on all four of these tests. And really the content actually almost entirely overlaps. So it's not even like the SAT and the ACT are dealing with totally different. I mean, really the GMAT and the GRE test math up to like 10th, 11th grade. It's almost the exact same math, really. I mean, really it is. So I would say actually virtually identical. In fact, to some extent, the ACT like math goes a little higher in level of difficulty of math. Like it gets into matrices and like, polar vectors and things like that that are like kind of like pre-calc things that don't even appear actually on the GMAT and the GRE. That said, the GMAT and the GRE questions are harder, more on a critical thinking and problem solving level. So
Right.
there's really like they overlap so much that it's actually not that hard to go back and forth between them. You're just kind of calibrating difficulty level a little bit of like, okay, like I can't give this person like as hard a question because they're a 16-year-old taking the ACT. And, I don't want to give someone on the GMAT something that is, yeah, like math, really, 11th grade, algebra 2, kind of advanced algebra 2 topic that's very, very unlikely to appear on the GRE or something like that.
Got it, Brian. Brian, probably the last bit that I want to, talk about is the business side of things. You said, obviously, you were a one-man, one-person teaching company, these in test prep, and then, you've got about 4 to 5 people now. And I mean, why is it just 4 to 5 people, or is it a conscious thing? I mean, do you have plans of making it bigger? I'm sure if you can get to this point, you can get more students as well. So, are you just comfortable? Uh, is this a sweet spot for you? Why are you in the stage that you are not lesser or more?
Yeah, good question. I was gonna make a joke and say, well, like ultimately, I'd like to buy X and own a social media platform that I can use to take over the world, and maybe get our species to other planets too, if I could do that. Um, So,
Somebody just did
oh,
at least half
shoot,
of it.
no, really? Um, so, so okay. I guess the first thing is just like why I'm not a one man show anymore. I mean, I'll just tell you quickly that because that leads into like the growth in general. I mean, two things. One is like I reached a point where like I was getting more referrals than I could take myself, and so it seemed like that was one thing. Second thing is like I'm expensive, and I'd like to be able to help people. I mean, again, my other tutors are still expensive. SAT, ACT is cheaper, so we're in a lower, we have a lower range there. But like, yeah, I mean, I wanted to be able to, help more people and also have options for people that aren't, as expensive. Again, it's still expensive, but at least something that's a little bit more affordable for some people. I mean, ultimately, maybe one day I can, offer classes or some other or like online, platform. That's part of the logic of like posting articles all the time is I spend a lot of time writing those articles. I don't chat GPT them. They're really like I'm trying to give away as much as I can there for people who really like don't want to spend any money on tutoring and want help. So anyway, that was one thing. The other thing is I think I'm saying this partly just to be funny, but it's also serious. Like I got sick in like 2018 with a flu. And I was like, well, no, it's nothing bad. But I was like out
Okay.
for like 10 days. I was really like fever. I could barely like get out of bed. And it occurred to me that like this is what I do is kind of like risky in the sense that like it's just me, right? And like what if and I have kids and I have a family and like what if something happens to me, right? Like it's all on
Right.
me.
Right.
I couldn't work for like a week, and so that was the other thing that I was like, you know what? Like this is almost like a kind of like, you know, hedging, it's a hedging strategy a little bit, like this way, if something happens to me, there's other tutors, this is bigger than just me. They can carry things on without me and stuff like that. So that was kind of the like really the spark that lit me. Because I had been really having overflow for a while and still not doing it. I also just truthfully like to tutor a lot, and I'm not innately a business person. So just the whole thing of it seemed like not super appealing to me. But then, yeah, I was like reached a point where I was like, all right, let me do this, and got some advice from people because I've done this for so long. I know a lot of people in this industry, and got some advice from I would even call them mentors to some extent, and that was helpful. And yeah, man, it was hard getting this up and running. I had like separate websites. I had like a GMAT website and an SAT website, and then I had to unite that into a single, said like Reason GMAT and Reason SAT as opposed to Reason Test Prep. So I had to like kind of rebrand and then yeah, it was a many years process, honestly, of like building all the foundation to get to this point. And then yeah, I mean, I I have the number of tutors I have just because that's the demand I have, I guess, right now. You know what I mean? And I don't want to overhire because people
Right.
I want people like I'm training the hell out of people, right? I want them to like be able to get in there and like work, and also I generally have hired people who like are making this like almost a quasi full time. It's not full time, but like people who are counting on this for income, you know what I mean? And not just a little side gig of doing a couple hours. I'm not interested in hiring
Right.
people, right? So I feel pressure to then provide students for these people once they're like, they've thrown their lot in with me, so to speak. And like now I feel like I need to feed them, basically. You know what I mean? So that's probably not a great thing because then what happens is sometimes we're a little bit overloaded and we may need to turn people away, but that's just the way
Right.
I'm comfortable doing it. And so, yeah, I mean, I'd like to probably add on a bit more, just because I think once you reach a certain point of scale, then like I still do a lot of tutoring. I'd probably be able to cut back a little bit more on that if I had more tutors, but like I don't want to be huge. I mean, once it gets beyond what I can handle myself and really keep track of with what everyone's doing, then it becomes to me a totally different enterprise. And I
Right.
mean, I'm not saying I wouldn't ever get to that point, but that's definitely not like what I'm trying to do right now.
Got it. Yeah. It's like the sweet spot where, you can still have control, keep the quality in check and,
Exactly.
not drop. So yeah, maybe, yeah. So, and how many hours a day you work? And in that, how many hours do you end up tutoring? How many hours do you end up training? And
Yeah.
how many hours do you end up writing?
Jeez.
I mean, just a ballpark figure,
Yeah. No, it's good. It's good. Great questions. I should, again, as a business person, I should have an answer to all those. I should know that already, right? So, I mean, I work a lot right now because I'm still in this like in between stage of like I still need to do a lot of tutoring to kind of to pay for all the overhead and everything else. And, again, I have kids, I have a family. Um, uh, but I'm also in a stage where like I care a lot about the quality of what we do, and so I'm doing a lot of
Right.
quality control and training. And some of the people I've hired recently. So there's kind of ongoing training throughout. For that we have team meetings. That's another kind of training quality control thing. So anyway, I would say I'm probably doing on an average week maybe, I don't know, like say 20 hours of tutoring a week, which is I think probably a lot for like a business owner.
It
Some
is.
some weeks maybe more than that. And then, yeah, I mean, I'm probably spending, I don't know, 30 to 40 hours a week, like running the business. Maybe not quite, but it's probably like a 50 to 60 hour week right now. So it's a lot. I'm doing a lot.
It's a lot. Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, again, it's a lot. I don't know. I tutor people who are investment bankers who are working 100 hours a week. So it's all relative. But for someone at my age, in my position, I'm putting in a lot of hours. But and then of the like, kind of the business part of it, I'm probably, I don't know, like writing articles, creating resources for the tutors, for our team, kind of all that like knowledge creation sort of, I guess I would call it. I don't know, maybe that's, I don't know, 5 to 10 hours a week, something like that. I mean, I'm still spending a fair amount of time on that. Maybe, yeah, maybe more like 5 hours. I think the training and quality control, there's a lot of that. There's a lot of me keeping track of the tutors, because we do this all online and we have video recordings of everything. I can just check in and see how tutors are doing with stuff, checking in with my tutors and talking to them, having them shadow me, and then hanging out after the meeting and talking about what happened in the meeting. And like, so there's a lot of that goes on. Um, Let me give up on actually giving you like number of hours for all this because it's not going to add up to whatever I said. It was like 20 or 30 hours a week on the business side of it. I probably won't get this to add up, right? But I'd say that's a big part of it. And then, like, I'm really not doing much like marketing, stuff right now. I mean, we have a newsletter. That's kind of form of marketing. In the newsletter, we feature articles that go on the website. So I guess that's some, form of marketing, but like, it's not really leading to much directly. It's maybe establishing us as
How many people are
experts.
subscribed to your newsletter, Brian?
We have,
Roughly.
I think we've got, it's under 1,000, like maybe like 800 or 900 people. And it's
Right.
almost entirely like, it's all, I don't know what to call it. It's all previous students, previous clients, previous people who've reached out, people in the industry. You know what I mean? It's like, I think we
You
get
can't look at that as a source of business, really.
No, but like we get a pretty good like open rate and like click rate on it. Like I think of, more
Right.
than average, like people are actually opening and reading it and like clicking on the links and stuff like that. So again, like I don't think it's it's not generating new leads directly, but I think it
Right.
establishes us as experts in the industry and, it probably helps lead to referrals, but it's hard to track. It's hard to track how much it's like really doing. So, but that leads back, if you want to come full circle, this is just an example of like how I've just like thrown a lot of darts at the board and like not knowing what was going to work. So like, leaving business, like posting, a thing with little cuts on the bottom with my name and phone number where you can just rip it off at Starbucks. Like, okay, that was like, that didn't even hit the dartboard, right? It
Right.
probably didn't even stick in the wall. Probably didn't even make it to the wall. It fell on the floor short of the dartboard. Whereas like, other things that I've tried like have been much more fruitful. And like the newsletter, again, I don't know how like helpful that's been, but because of who it's going to and because it's all referrals and because those people I already know or have had, contact with, and some of them value what I have to say, because the newsletter isn't just about test prep. We do other things in the newsletter to try to keep people interested in reading it even when they're done with the test prep. I
Right.
think that, that to me seems like something that has hit the board and is probably like helping us. But yeah, I guess we're not doing that much. Like I've got a long list of like video creation and all these other things for a YouTube channel that like I just haven't had time to get around to. So I'd say like marketing is not a big part of what we're doing. It's mostly training, quality control, stuff like, and then like creating content and creating better resources for tutors and stuff like that.
Got it, Brian. And is this the same process that you follow for SAT and ACT as well? Or is it a little less touch point?
In terms of kind of how I'm spending my time and using and training tutors and quality control.
The process that you're following for GRE, GMAT,
Yeah.
in terms of training, quality, and all those things.
Yeah, it's the same. I mean, I view them almost the same. I mean, some of our tutors do both, right? Like some of our tutors do.
Wait, where I'm coming from is, does it need that much? Is what where I'm coming from.
In terms of like
does it warrant as much effort as you put in for GRE, GMAT? Or is it a little less, low effort sort of a thing?
I think it almost requires more. I mean, I would almost say like maybe that's not quite right, but probably equal, because I mean, first of all, I think it's hard to get traction among parents, to be referring. I mean, they do, right? That is kind of that's mostly our source of like new, students for the SAT and ACTs, like from referrals from parents and stuff like that. But like, I don't know, that can be hard to like really generate and keep going. And so I think it can be hard from like a marketing and bringing in new students perspective, for
Right.
SAT and ACT. And then, yeah, I mean, I don't know, to me, like the quality control, like, and training, I don't know, like that's kind of as important because, I don't know, first of all, you're dealing with parents as the customer, the customer for a GMAT and GRE student is
It's just the student, right? Yeah.
Whereas with an SAT, ACT kid, you're dealing with the kid, but you're also dealing with the parents, and you have to make sure communication is happening and the expectations, and like it's harder really in a way to make sure everyone's on the same page. And it's like, look,
right,
like Jessica's going to take the December SAT, but like this is a first go. It's not likely to go that well. And like, we're having her do it just as kind of an early try, but like this is, and you can say that to the student in the session and they get it. But like, if you haven't communicated that well to the parents, then like the score comes back and they're like, what the F? Like, I don't understand, like what's going on here,
right?
Score wise. And like, well, we talked about it, and because you're having much less communication with them, that's harder to make sure everyone's on the same page. So I don't know. I think and then yeah, with SAT and ACT kids, like keeping them focused is more difficult. We have all these strategies for like, what do you do when a kid is like not really paying attention? And there's different ways you can deal with that. That's something we discuss like at team meetings. So yeah, I think it's like it's as time consuming from kind of a business perspective to make sure that's all going well, and to like make sure, we have, enough students and stuff like that.
Got it, Brian. So let me conclude with this. From a business point of view, if there is one or two problems that are on top of your list that you're trying to solve as soon as possible, what are those?
I guess the number one thing is just my time, right? Like clearly I'm spending
right.
a lot of time, and the question is, how do I do all of this with either spending less time, or how do I do more of it? But, I can't get to the video creation because I'm just spending too much time on everything else. Like, so how can I just be more efficient and more effective with my time? I think that's really the number one thing. And I think like, that's probably true, I would think, for most business owners. It's like, for entrepreneurs, when you're starting off as yourself and then you're trying to scale it, it's a constant battle of like handing things off and delegating. And I care a lot about what we do. I'm not like a control freak. I just care about providing a great service, and we have a reputation for being great at what we do. And I care about students being really happy and like walking away, even if they don't get the score they want, right? Like, I just want them to feel like we gave it our all. Like, I left it all on the field and gave it my all. And maybe you didn't get to the score you wanted, but like, I did everything I could to get you there. And I'm an expert at what I do. And I did everything I could. And like, and they're like, yeah, I don't blame you. This was the best. Yeah, I don't think I could have been in better hands. The outcome is what it is. Like, that's what we're aiming for. So I think, to hand things off and be able to maintain that level of like excellence, I think has been really challenging. This has been part of what I've learned over the years of just how to do that better and better. But I'd say, I mean, probably that dwarfs, I know you said like one or two things. I think that probably dwarfs all other problems that I'm trying to solve.
Right.
And it's a constant battle of trying to figure out how I could be better at that.
Got it, Brian. Ryan, thanks so much for the time. It was great talking to you, and thank you for sharing or answering all of the questions that I asked you.
Yeah, it was a pleasure. It was a pleasure to be here, and happy to share it. Hope it was helpful for the listeners.
Yeah.